Patrons, welcome. Hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing all of you, or as many as we can, this Sunday at the Die-In for the live podcast. Don't be afraid to come up and say hello. Looking forward to seeing so many. It's the biggest live podcast we're doing. We've sold it out more or less. We've never done these numbers before. We're moving. We're moving up. We're climbing the ladders, ladies and gentlemen. And that's all down to good people like you who spread the word and tell people, who dip in and dip out of the podcast. We get it. That's how the game works. Sure, every man and his dog has a podcast, but not every man and his dog or woman or person will have this gentleman as a guest. Former PSNI police officers coming into Cork in the North to tell us his story about policing here in the North during his career. Chris Stothers, how are you?
All good, Andrew. Thanks very much for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Chris. Now, we do kind of know each other. And you've obviously told me loads of stuff about your career, which is fascinating stuff since you've kind of retired and come out of the police. So first of all, Chris, we want to find out what it's like policing here, probably in the early 2000s and stuff like that, right up to the present day. What are the issues with the policing? What's going on with the policing? You've been on the front line, you've been on the back line, you've been everywhere. You know exactly what it's like. How many years did you do in the police service?
21 and a half years.
Are you retired now?
Totally retired as of the 4th of April this year.
21 years. That's, you know, the way some people have jobs where they do like 30 years and stuff like that. 21 years. Is that the police retirement age, or were you just like, I'm done and dusted, I've arrested as many as I can?
21 and out.
20.
No, I was medically retired on the 4th of April of this year. And I suppose what I was involved in over those 21 years was quite a lot. Normally 30, 35 years would be retirement age, but unfortunately I was diagnosed with complex PTSD as a result of my experiences within policing.
Sure, we all have that. Right, so 21 years. So first of all, talk to me a little bit about why you joined, why were you attracted to the police force?
I always wanted to be in the police. As you know, Andrew, I grew up in the mean streets of County Down, Ards Peninsula. And
we all know what's like down there.
It was rough, man.
Quiet.
It was rough.
Quiet.
So I was 20 when I joined the police. I had been over at Dundee doing electronic and computer engineering. Came home just before Christmas and Mum was standing in the kitchen, visibly upset. And I said to her, "What's wrong?" And she burst out crying. She says, "I'm really sorry, I've opened your mail. You've been accepted into the police." Mum didn't want me to go into the police because, well, I'm her son and she's a warrior. I'm the eldest of 4 boys, but it's what I always wanted to do. So that was me, 12th of January 2003. I started in Garnival, Police Training College.
So that's our Templemore.
Yes,
in
yes,
the
exactly.
south, like they all go to Templemore. So like all the pubs and the restaurants around Templemore are all full of young guards.
Yeah,
Garda Síochánas.
Yeah, pretty much the same.
Where is Garnival?
Garnival is Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'll not give too much away.
Well, you can
but
see,
it's signposted.
if you drive past it, it says police training college.
Absolutely.
Oh, no, well, we can't tell you where it is, but there is a sign outside the door. Like,
police training college.
Where's the airport? Do you know where the planes are? It's around that area. It's around that area.
Yeah.
So what's it like going in there? Were you sleeping over? Were you sleeping in there?
Yeah. So I had just come back from Scotland, as I said. Normally, you had to stay in for the first 4 weeks. Everybody had to stay for those first 4 weeks. I stayed for the whole time, stayed for the full 20 weeks in Garnival. And what was it like? A massive culture shock. I was 20. I had very little life experience. As I say, I grew up in the mean streets of Cloghey.
And if you've been to Cloghey, you'll know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Up there with Harlem, some of the toughest areas.
Just a ghetto. Just a ghetto.
The Balkans.
I'm not going to lie, but Eastern Ukraine has nothing on it.
Exactly. So, so that was me in the Garnival. I was still a boy, really. In fact, prior to starting, we had an open night, and as I went into Garnival, everybody was there with their partners, their wives, their husbands. My mum and dad took me up. That's how sort of immature and young I was. Yeah. I started in Garnival, massive culture shock, and the first night we were 2 a.m, we were bulling boots. I'd never polished a boot before, let alone bull boots. We were doing drill, marching around the squares, very militaristic, and just a massive shock to to the system.
What year was this now? We're talking
2003.
2003. Wow. Okay, so you're after Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah.
You're after the new. This was the new PSNI. It still wasn't.
Oh yeah,
OEC.
yeah. No,
so this is a new wave of policing.
Yeah.
That's been agreed by all the people that brought together the peace deal. So it's like a new beginning.
Yeah, new beginning. Peacetime policing in Northern Ireland, as I thought.
Wow. Yeah. And when you went in, did you get on straight away with everybody else? Was everybody else as nervous as you? Like, was because obviously, like, look, policing in the north, it's still a very contentious issue. Like, for example, we all know that people, when they go out socially and you ask them what they do, you don't hear, I'm a police officer. Whereas, when I'm down south in Cork, it's like people say to you, like, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I'm a guard. You're like, oh, you're a guard. Okay, grand. Yeah. It's a very normal thing to say that you're a guard. Whereas up here, people seem to have cover stories and stuff.
Absolutely. And I've had that cover story for years. It's only in recent months since leaving the police that I'm nervous but comfortable in saying that, yes, I was a police officer. I spent the last 21 years being a police officer. Very, very proud of the work that I've done, the stuff I've been involved in. But it's time for something else. I no longer can do that role because of the trauma and the PTSD that I'm now diagnosed with. But it's time for something else. And I want to get out and share my story about policing in Northern Ireland. Yeah.
Was it good crack?
Excuse me. I loved it. I loved every moment of it. I'd
say it is like.
Yeah. It was brilliant. From the start, in Gardaval, I was the youngest in my squad, so I was like a fish out of water. We had a bar in Gardaval, so there was a bit of a social side to it. They're all done away with now. All the pubs and police stations.
Were you all copping off with each other, like?
I don't believe so, Andrew. I don't believe so.
You didn't see anything like you?
Didn't see a thing.
Your head was looking the other way.
I didn't see anything.
It's amazing.
See anything like
that. It's amazing when you're in the police, you're looking for witnesses, and then when it comes to your own behaviour, no one sees anything.
Didn't see anything. Hold on. Are we on a podcast or is this Castlereagh?
Go on.
Yeah, so I don't know. With good fun.
It's like all jobs, man. It makes no difference. Everyone does it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why did they do away with those pubs in the police station?
I don't actually. I think it was a change in attitudes towards the drinking on duty, I suppose. I'm joking. I don't mean drinking on duty, but drinking sort of in police establishments.
Yeah. So then what did they replace that with in terms of social stuff?
Nothing really. I think when I first started the police, or first started within the PSNI, there was a massive social side to things. But over the years, I did see that start to sort of dwindle away a bit. Yeah, very much so. When I started policing, actually in a section on the ground, our section were very social because you socialised with each other purely because of the situation here. You were working the same shifts as each other, so you were off the same times as each other, and you would have socialised together. So yeah.
When you qualified with your training, where were you first stationed?
I was stationed in North Belfast.
Right. So you're going into North Belfast, and did you have to commute every day from where you lived?
Yeah, and that's
an hour.
Yeah,
about an hour.
Yeah, about an hour. Yeah,
but that is encouraged, isn't it? You don't live in the area where you police, or that's the rule, isn't it? Or is it a rule, or is it?
I'm not sure that it's a rule per se, but I think in areas where there would be a heightened threat. So at that time, North Belfast was probably different than it is today. But at that time, there was a lot of public disorder. There was serious terrorist threat. So there's nobody working within that area that lived in that area because it just would have been too dangerous.
Do you remember your first arrest?
My first arrest, yes, I do.
What did you do? Who was it? What is it?
It was a joyrider.
Right? Yeah. In North Belfast?
In North Belfast, yeah. And it was a joyrider. A car had crashed. The kid in the car was absolutely off his head on glue, drugs, drink, and he was more or less handed to me. Here, kid, here's your first arrest. So,
sounds like a good night.
Yeah, so the tutor constable that was with me, sort of walking me around, keeping me right, essentially. He said, this is your first arrest, well done, you've just caught a joyrider. And that was it. There wasn't a big pile to it. There's nothing dramatic about it, really. My first arrest.
So you cuff him, put him in the van, down to the station, check him in, all that kind of stuff,
Yeah,
is it?
yeah.
And what was his attitude to you like?
Oh, he didn't know where he was, to be honest.
Oh, right, okay. So he wasn't
no,
effing and blinding
Not
and
really,
stuff.
no. He was just off his head. Starting in North Belfast, when I did sort of start in North Belfast properly in the section, Tennis Street was my first proper section. It was just a massive culture shock. I couldn't believe the way that the communities lived, the way that they interacted with each other or didn't. In the mornings, we used to have to open the gates at Hallidays Road off the White Well to let the two communities mix again.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time thinking, this is crazy.
Yeah.
People's attitudes towards police was flipping frightening. And you felt as if there was always a target on your back. No matter what community you were policing, should it been the loyalist community or the nationalists, you always felt as if there was a threat or you weren't welcome.
Like no community, no side of the communities wanted you.
No.
They wanted to basically do it themselves, did they?
Yeah,
Is that
pretty
kind
much,
of how
yeah.
much they wanted? Like
Yeah.
the self-police.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk about the gates, and you think like, oh, that's very, it's very odd that we have to open gates to let two communities. But then, like, I'm from Cork, and I would like a gate to lock Limerick off. So, if anything, I'm fully encouraged that if we could get rid of Limerick. Ha! Come at me, Limerick people. No one in Limerick listens. I've checked the analytics. That's fine. So when you were doing it, were you excited going to work every day?
Yeah, excited and nervous. I loved going to work. I loved going there, and you never knew what that day was going to bring. At that time, the public disorder was massive. The first few months, I was hardly in a green uniform. We were normally in public order attire because they were rioting at the drop of a hat. Very shortly into my career, it was a Sunday afternoon, and I remember the Orange Shop fronts kicking off. They were rioting, a couple of hundred either side, all because Rangers were playing Celtic. And at the time I thought, who cares? I don't even like football. Who cares? But they obviously did care. And it was difficult. It was a bit of an eye-opener, but...
The hatred.
The hatred for each other, the two communities at that time, the hatred for each other, and the hatred towards police. It took a long time. Well, that's not strictly true. It didn't take a long time to adapt. I adapted very quickly. Because you have to. It's sort of that sink or swim mentality.
Sean, you grew up in West Belfast. What was the, when you were very young, what was the attitude, from someone like you when you saw, say, a police officer like Chris come down the street or in a van or whatever?
Yeah, growing up in my community, it was sort of the thing where there wasn't really a lot of trust for police. So a common thing you'll probably know, Chris, is that within the nationalist community especially, like, you wouldn't go to the police if there was something done to you, say a burglary or or an assault or something like that. People typically tried to refrain from going to the police because there was a lack of trust there from things that happened during the Troubles, and not really recognising the PSNI as like a, anything different to the RUC.
So you just basically just change their clothes and it's the same thing?
So that's sort of the attitude in West Belfast. So I was always sort of told, you don't go to the police.
Would you go to the police now?
I would, yeah.
So in 20 odd years of, you're in your mid-20s, what has changed for you?
I think just reality. I think people are a lot... Obviously, my generation doesn't have the same trauma and the same experiences with the police as the previous generation did. Yeah. So
I find it really strange that maybe Sean's parents wouldn't ring you, but Sean would.
Yeah. And that's something I'm very aware of, that, I definitely seen that culture changing throughout my time in North Belfast. Towards the latter stage, there did start to become more calls into the likes of Ardoyne, and I can only speak about the areas I policed, but Ardoyne, staunchly nationalist Republican area, the New Lodge, we did start to get more calls, but in those early days, there was very, very few calls into those areas.
And when you went into those areas that you knew that didn't like you or didn't trust you and stuff, was your supervisors ever saying to you, guys, go in there and be as nice as you can so we can build trust?
No, I wouldn't say that they were saying that, because it didn't have to be said. I always like to think that I treated people the way I would expect my family to be treated. I didn't go in there with the attitude of this is a nationalist area, this is a loyalist area. We were there to police those areas. I myself come from a mixed marriage. My mum was Catholic, dad Protestant. I wasn't brought up with any of that sort of discrimination. It just wasn't within our household.
But if you had to pick a side, Chris.
Well, if you had to put me on the spot here.
What are you joking?
But no, I can say the same for the boys and girls that I work with. With my colleagues, I never seen any of that sort of.
Yeah, I
bias.
Know what you mean. Yeah.
I genuinely didn't. Going into those areas now, going into Ardoyne, going into the Shankill Estate, going into the New Lodge, we had bricks and balls thrown at us. You just couldn't have went in without having something thrown at you. Should it be bricks, bottles, petrol bombs, flipping blast bombs on occasion? That was just the harsh reality of it, and it was very difficult, very frightening time. But you do sort of harden to it, and it just becomes the norm. And it is crazy what becomes your normality.
So do you like getting abused, getting stuff thrown at you? It's like, you go to work for 9-10 hours or whatever it is, and you're driving up the road and you're listening to the radio and you're singing along to a song, then you get to the station, you put the gear on, you go out in the street and you're treated like crap for 9 hours, and you get back in the car and you're like, do, like that sort of mindset.
Well, I don't
must
think
be very difficult.
It was never that mindset, because you're going to work, so you're driving up the road to work, and you're in that sort of state of relax. So you'll come out in the morning, you'll check your car to make sure there isn't a device underneath. You'll then get into the car and you'll drive up the road and you'll feel relatively safe until, and again, I'm only speaking about my journey, until I would have got to maybe the outskirts of Belfast, and then you become that bit more aware. You start looking at cars that are around you. You become vigilant as to who's watching you on the way in. And the closer you get to your station, the more that increases. You then go into work and you put up with those 10, 12 hours of abuse, having stuff thrown at you, the heightened threat, because that sort of vigilance has to remain, especially in the likes of North Belfast, where there is a terrorist threat. That vigilance remains with you for those 12 hours. You then get in your car to do the whole thing again and go home. So there's never that sort of switching off point. Policing in Northern Ireland's quite different to anywhere else within the UK and Ireland. You don't take your uniform off, hang it in the locker, and that's your job done for the day, or that's you can switch off. You just can't switch off. It's something that you take home with you. It's something that you're very conscious when you're around your family. Will somebody come to the door to attack me? Will somebody place a device under my car? It's there isn't that switch off period.
Have you ever had stuff like that where people have followed you, or there's something under your car, or you've been found, people have come for you after work or anything?
Well, I was followed home on one occasion. I became aware that a car was following me from sort of Crumlin Road direction. It was still with me by the time I got to Sydenham bypass. And it still continued. I got to Newton Ards, the car was still there, and initially I thought maybe it's one of the guys from work, heading the same direction as me. But once I hit Newton Ards, I started to get very suspicious. And probably at that time I was very wet behind the ears. I should have pulled into Newton Ards police station, and that would have been how the matter should have been resolved properly. That naivety of mine, I continued down the road. The car followed me. I started to get quite anxious then. I stopped. Whilst this was going on, I was actually on the phone to Ards Police, making them aware. So I stopped at one of the villages. The car stopped behind me a few hundred metres back. I pulled off again. It pulled off again. I was really panicking at this stage. I then stopped again, and the car stopped initially, then done a U-turn in the in the middle of the road. The way it went, never seen it again.
Wow.
But it was frightening. And something that I've never actually told you. A few nights later, I was lying in bed in the house. Was living by myself at this stage, and I could hear in the early hours of the morning. I heard a diesel engine running, just ticking over outside. I was up for a night shift, or up for an early the next morning, so I wasn't sleeping properly. So I rolled over to the window and looked out, and I could see a guy standing with a black beanie hat on, and I thought, flip, they've got me. And I'll be honest, I absolutely shit myself. I got my gun from under the pillow.
As you do.
Yeah.
As you do.
I snuck down the stairs, near enough on my belly, went round the back door and looked round the corner of the gable end of the houses, came round through the back gardens and looked round the gable end of the houses, gun in my hand, in my pyjamas, and seen the guy delivering Yellow Pages phone books to the door. But that's how
paranoid
I was.
Yeah.
Like thankfully it wasn't a terrorist, but yeah, that's how paranoid
you're
I was.
alert all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And even now that you're out of the police, you're still alert.
Yes, and this is, doing the likes of this is a very daunting experience for me, because I've spent the last 21 and a half years
living
hiding
a
my
lie.
identity. Well, pretty much. Not necessarily living
a lie, but you know what I mean? Like not being,
having that cover story, if you had asked me 2 years ago, what do you do? I'm an electrician, because I can bluff my way through that and sort of pretend.
It'll be worse than if they ask you electricity, say, will you come around and give us a quote? And you're just like, oh no, I can't go around.
I don't know, have you seen the prices for the electricity charge?
So you progress so you're policing, you're kind of wet green behind ears, you learn how's it going and you progress. And what level do you go up to? Where do you go from constable to what?
So I stayed as a constable throughout my time within the PSNI, but I had a very good career. Just to go back to finish my time in North Belfast before I did progress. So in 2010, I was actually shot during a riot. So that was a bad day at the office.
No, it's quite a normal day for me.
Yeah.
You're shot.
Yeah,
you're shot.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So it was 11th of July 2010.
The day before.
Day before the 12th. Yeah. We had been on sort of just trying to keep the peace, I suppose. It was quite contentious. You could feel there was an atmosphere building.
So this is the bonfire night. This
Bonfire
is the
night,
11 night. Sean, you've been to a few 11 nights, have you?
Oh,
Yeah.
no,
No.
I haven't.
That's mad. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So talk me through the day. What happened?
So we started that day, and I had, up till this point, I had done 6-7 years of very similar 10th, 11th, 12th of Julys. There was that tension in the air. You just knew, you could near enough smell the tension in the air. We got a call. Calls started coming in. Belfast had kicked off quite a bit. Broadway, there was rioting going on at Broadway. The water cannons were over there. And we were tasked down to the New Lodge. There was a bit of a crowd gathering. So as we went down to the New Lodge, tried to sort of get a lid on it, couldn't. It turned into a riot. So we ended up fighting with the nationalist community at that time, actually, who were trying to make their way up towards Tigers Bay.
Is this to meet
the
loyalist community?
Yeah, just seemed to be to stir tensions, and that night it was the nationalist community making their way up to Tigers Bay. On another night it could have been the other way round, just to try and stir those tensions. But that night it happened to be the nationalist community within the New Lodge were looking for a fight. So we ended up rioting with them. Went on for quite a while. I ended up in a shield line, and we went to take a junction. And as soon as we had taken the junction, I heard those fateful words, gunman, gunman.
Ugh.
And as soon as I heard that, I heard a bang and felt a whoosh. But it felt like a blast bomb going off, just that sort of blast wave washing over me. I turned to the guy beside me and I said, fuck mate, that was close. I didn't realise just how close it was, because seconds later, I couldn't hold my shield up any longer. I was at a trail and the pain hit me. I felt like I'd been hit by a breeze block on the elbow. I felt as if my elbow had exploded. But I still had the presence of mind. I got myself into hard cover behind one of the Land Rovers, and there was an inspector had been sort of sent down to try and get a grip of things. And I said to him, boss, I think I've been hit. So he started ripping the pads off me, got to the back of the truck and could feel the blood welling up inside my blue suit. I could feel blood running down my chest. So I knew then I was injured. I wasn't 100% sure I'd been shot, but I knew I was seriously injured. Managed to get down North Queen Street into a police car, and the guy in the car, Stevie, he took me up to the hospital, the Mater Hospital. As we got to the hospital, there was a crash team waiting for me, so nurses and a doctor. Got into the hospital and they cut the blue suit off me, and I could see that my arm was quite badly mutilated, sort of hanging open. A lot of holes in my chest and my abdomen, all down my left-hand side.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a bad day at the office.
Unbelievable. To be shot, like.
Yeah. Yeah, it was one of those ones. I'll never forget it.
Your mother was right when she opened the post. She was very nice. She didn't want because she was a worrier. Imagine getting that. So talk to me about the family and how this all happened after you got shot then.
Well, I didn't want somebody else ringing mum and dad for obvious reasons. They were taking me in for surgery. They suspected I had internal bleeding at the time, so they were taking me in for surgery. So I rang mum and dad's house. Dad answered the phone. This is about 3 a.m, 3:30 a.m. And Dad, Drew, half asleep, answered the phone. I said to him, don't be panicking, but I'm in hospital. He said, right, okay. What's wrong with you? I said, don't be panicking, but I've been shot. He said, right, okay. And he hung up the phone. I thought, fuck, he took that well. So that was okay. The phone call ended. I was going for surgery. Immediately the phone rang back, and he said, did you just tell me you've been shot? Dad was obviously sleeping, thought he was dreaming, and had rang me to make sure I was okay. So the bloom went up. They started to panic. I assured them I was okay. I was going for surgery, and I'd see them when I come out of surgery. So yeah, that was that. Horrible phone call to have received for mum and dad, and I never realised until recently, now that I'm writing about my experience within policing, and I chatted to mum and dad about that night, and they told me that the very next day they knew they couldn't get up to see me. They drove to Windmill Hill in Portaferry, and the two of them cried. And I had never heard that before.
Oh, wow.
And when I heard that, it broke my heart, because I didn't realise the impact that had on mum and dad, you know.
That's to be able to, you know, you never really meet, you know, you meet people and they go like, oh, what did you do? Like, oh, I was in the police, or I was a guard, or I was in the army and all that. And then you meet somebody, you go, how are you? Oh yeah, I was shot a couple of times, yeah. Because I think the North today is so far away. Obviously there's incidents and there's, you know, some terrible stuff. That police officer that was inspector that was shot, John Caldwell, a couple of years ago, Lyra McKee up in Derry and stuff like that. Like, you know, there is incidents, and you know, there is this thing where, I know this is going to sound like really odd thing to say, but even though there's the odd incident, which is still terrible, the fact that these are so isolated does show that there still is a lot of progress that has happened. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah.
And how long were you off sick for? Like, how long were you out for?
So I was off for 10 months in total.
Wow. And did any of the people call out to see you? Like, what was the crack? Like, were they taking the piss out of you?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? People go, geez, there's nothing wrong with you, man. Just be a couple of holes.
Tighten up, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because I presume the police banter is quite harsh.
Was that sort of, that dark humour, you know, that's how you get through it. You know, policing, you know, in normal circumstances, you see some horrific scenes. Yeah. You are dealing with the worst of society at times. So to get through that, you need. Yeah,
you're never going to somebody's best day, are you?
No, you're not.
If Absolutely I see the police or an ambulance, it's a bad day.
100%,
so you're only going to awful things. You're not saying actual good things in society.
No, and that's what I said. My experiences of policing in North and West Belfast for a while, I met some lovely people in North and West Belfast, salt of the earth people. But unfortunately, when I was meeting those people, they've been the victim of crime. They'd had their cars stolen, they've been assaulted, their house burgled. So my experiences of working in those areas, I was always dealing with, I suppose, the dregs of society, you know, in those areas, because they were the criminals. They were the people who were doing harm onto the good, law-abiding citizens.
Talk to me a little bit about the funding for the police. We see it every couple of weeks on the news, funding, recruitment, wages, underfunded, not enough officers, people join and leaving after 3 or 4 years. Over your career in those 21 years or so, like, what are the biggest challenges? Do you think funding is the answer? Like, what is the kind of like the way the PSNI is working today for you?
I can't. All I can do is give my opinion. I can't answer with any sort of certainty, but funding is massive. The police, the PSNI in particular, are so underfunded.
Why? Why are they underfunded?
That's a governmental issue. I don't know.
Do you think this money is? I'm guessing. Would this money would probably have to come from London? Would it?
Yeah, I'd imagine.
So they don't really give a shit, do they?
I don't know. Again,
I don't personally. I mean, I've no skin in the game. I'm not a former police officer, but I've lived in England for a long time, and I loved living there. Yeah. But I genuinely do believe that they don't really give a shit.
I don't know. I just know all I can speak about is my experiences within policing, within the PSNI. There's massive disparity, or there would appear to be massive disparity between the PSNI and the English police forces, in that the funding, they are underfunded as well. But I think Northern Ireland and the setup of our government here leads for a lot of red tape and a lot of bureaucracy to get that money on the ground. You
think for a place like the North, who have come through many decades of trauma and hurt and the troubles and stuff, you think that to keep breaking that cycle, that it would probably be, I would have thought it would have been the most funded police force because of the history of the types of violence that has happened here. Whereas, you have a police force in Leeds, for example, in England, in Yorkshire, in England. Of course, they're going out to domestics, they're going out to crimes, they're going out to robberies, they're going out to, joyriders, going out to drugs and all that. Because the North has all that anyway, plus the extra on top.
Yeah,
Leeds doesn't have paramilitaries.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Well, every police force has its sort of its idiosyncrasies. Is that the word? Or its nuances? It's it's minute problems. Specific to that area. We have paramilitaries here. We have the legacy of the Troubles. Unfortunately, in this country, we have people who are hell bent on dragging us back to that sort of. That place where we don't want to go. There are people here hell-bent on attacking the security forces. Would love nothing more than to see, a police officer, a soldier, prison officer killed, and the only way to combat that is to police it, in one form or the other.
Proper punishment, deterrent, prevention is better than cure.
Absolutely.
Get the intelligence in early, get these people to say, look, you know what I mean, that kind of stuff. But you don't have the resources to do that. That takes money. And bodies and people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's the difficulty with it.
It seems like a very underpaid job.
Yeah.
Because I know a friend of mine that did look at going in, and I was like, what? That's your salary for the first 5 or 6 years, whatever it is. And then you divide it up, you take away the PAYE and all that, and you actually look at it and you compare rental properties and stuff, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, it is crazy. It's definitely a job which is underpaid for what is expected, especially in Northern Ireland, for that heightened threat. And yes, I know there is sort of the Northern Ireland Alliance, for that, but it still does not allow or does not cover the risk and the threat to the officers.
I've said this before. I obviously we all pay tax, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, some of us pay tax. Hey, banter, lads. Anyway, and every so often we get our council tax bill, in the post or whatever, the land bill, right? And it gives you, well, I used to do it in England. I'm not sure if to do it here, but it'd say like 32% of this has gone to fire service, 36% of this has gone to police, 10% has gone to whatever, the refuge collection or whatever. Yeah. It gives you a breakdown of where your money is going. You're paying about $1,000 a year or something like that, right? I would happily pay a bit more. And I'm lucky I can afford it. And if it was means tested, that's fine. But if you said, so if I'm paying £100 a month for the council tax, as we call it, right? I'd pay 110 a month. But if I knew that £10 was going to police. Yeah. Now, obviously, not everybody can pay £110.
Yeah.
So I'm saying if you means tested it, I would happily pay a bit more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I suppose not everybody would be happy to pay an extra tenner to the police.
I understand that, yeah. But what I'm trying to say to you is, like, I'll give you an example. Julie was coming home from work recently and she saw somebody lying in a bag in a scorching heat in a car park. She thought the person was dead. and she rang. She stood there, didn't want to approach, didn't know what was going on. There was no way that person could be moving with this heat in sleeping bag and all at this time of the day, and rang the non-emergency number 11 minutes before they answered.
It's crazy.
So she hung up, and then 11 minutes, she still hadn't answered, sorry. So she rang 999.
It's crazy.
11 minutes.
Yeah. And it's, you take that across all the emergency services, trying to get an ambulance now, it's similar. It's crazy. The system, hey, I'm in no position to talk about the funding across the board. I can just talk about my experiences within policing. The way I see it and my view on it would be, you can't run policing the way you run a business. Policing takes money and resources to be spent on it to be successful, to deter people and to catch people, and that's the harsh reality of it. Policing needs money spent on it, and for long enough here, it hasn't had money spent on it. How do you motivate your officers when people are getting paid better in Tesco's? Like that in itself is shocking. A police officer starting is on less money than somebody working in Tesco's stacking shelves.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't really think that. So it's very hard to sell that as a career, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with working in Tesco's,
No,
in 2021, I was stacking shelves in B&Q.
Yeah.
And I was in there thinking, geez, I'd have it easier if I was in the police.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying for the level
I understand. Yeah. For the level of responsibility
Absolutely.
and what you're doing,
Yeah.
like obviously there's different. It's the same thing they say, like footballers and doctors and nurses and all that kind of stuff.
Now the pay, there was a pay rise last year, but again, when you look at it in relation to inflation and CPI. It's not enough. It's just not enough.
You see, the doctors recently got 22%.
Seen that? Yes. Yeah.
What are the police going to get?
I don't know.
Is there like a good policing union?
So the Police Federation for Northern Ireland, and they do great work for the support of the officers, and fighting those fights, fighting those pay challenges. But unfortunately, you're at the bequest of the government, and you add into that the sort of nuance of Northern Ireland, the Stormont Assembly, when it's sitting, it's an absolute minefield.
That's the big obstacle, I guess.
Yeah.
It just seems so very stop-start here.
Yeah.
You take one step forward and a couple of steps back.
Yeah.
So since you've come out of the police force now, Chris, you're a free man.
Free man.
A couple of bullet wounds. Sure, we've all been there. Right. What are you doing now in terms of work-wise and the experiences that you've had in the police? What are you doing? Because I know you're getting involved with some charities and stuff.
So I'm trying to champion PTSD awareness, or trying to sort of be an advocate.
Trying to promote it.
Trying to promote PTSD awareness.
Because that's what we need, isn't it?
Yeah.
Post-traumatic stress. That's what we need. We're trying to promote that. It's good for you. It's good for you.
Hey, it's the way forward. No, I'm trying to make people aware of PTSD awareness, especially within sort of those policing circles. I'm also writing a book about my experiences of policing. When I was shot, that wasn't the end of my policing story. I went on to specialise as a sort of in the counter-terrorism world. As a counter-terrorism specialist firearms officer. So I was involved in quite...
I'd say that was good crack.
That was brilliant, yeah. So the best job in the world, 100%.
Counter-terrorism.
Yeah.
What a sentence. Best job in the world, counter-terrorism.
Yeah.
What a sentence.
Yeah. I know.
It's good though.
Yeah.
But the fact that you went into the police and loved it, that's really good.
Yeah.
Because we do need police, we do need security and all that kind of stuff. So, so when you were doing counter-terrorism, there must have been some things that you've done there that we obviously it's very confidential. I appreciate that and respect that, but there must be some stuff that you go, I was on that, I did that.
Yeah. And that is cool. As I said at the start, I'm very proud of some of the things I've been involved in. I'm very proud to have made a difference to Northern Ireland through some of those operations.
You took a bullet for the place.
Yeah.
You took a bullet for the place.
Yeah.
When some people go, I take a bullet for my kids. You took a bullet for Northern Ireland, mate.
Yeah, fair enough.
Did you not get like a medal? Did you get like a medal or anything? Did you get a medal? Was it? Chris took bullet, legend, #.
Not quite. But yeah, I loved my time within policing. I made great friends. I've had great experiences. I've done things that people don't even know exists, let alone would be have been involved in. You know, so I've done some really cool things and love my time within the police, but it's just time for something else for me. So I'm writing a book about my experiences within policing, growing up in that rural environment, you know, being thrust into the conflict of North and West Belfast, a segregated community, really, you know, a not segregated, but a divided community where it was just conflict, a day and daily conflict. You know, my experiences of being shot, dealing with that, the sort of trauma around that, and then not wanting that to be the end of my policing career, and pushing myself to go on, deal with that adversity, and go on to the specialist world of counterterrorism.
Yeah. So you write this book, and also you're doing your talking as well. And
yeah.
stuff like
So I'm taking those skills that I've learned through 21 years of policing into the corporate world. So that critical thinking, you know, that the skills around briefing, debriefing, team management. I'm taking all those sort of softer skills and seeing how they can be applied into the corporate world.
Give me an example of critical thinking. Like, what is critical thinking? How would critical thinking work with someone like me, for example?
Well, critical thinking for yourself, you need to. It goes back to your day and daily. So if you employ that critical thinking mindset day and daily, your next day is always going to be better, because you're gonna see where I went wrong the day before and try and change that. So say this podcast, if this podcast didn't go well, you will think about that critically. Look, where were the flaws in that? And that doesn't always have to be the flaws. That can also be the good points in it.
The flaw in this podcast is me.
Not at all. But looking at that critically, looking at that, taking that step back and saying, right, okay, how could I have worded that question better? How could I have I don't know, you know, address the camera better. Only things you will know. But also, that was really good. I like the way I did that. I like the way I spoke, or I looked at the camera, and I'm going to take that forward and apply that to the next one. So there's a lot more to it, and it'd take a lot more to get into it. But
so you've not a lot of people do what you do in terms of the career that you've had, going into the police very young, obviously going through very challenging times of being shot, working in counter-terrorism, coming out medically retired, and now kind of going into the corporate world. You don't see a lot of people who come out and go, hey, this is me, I was in the police, here's my journey, here's my book, here's my story when that comes out. It's quite a brave thing to do, especially up here. Yeah. What made you come to this place?
I'll be honest, Andrew, I'm shitting myself doing this. I really am.
Hey, me and Sean are not violent.
I can't say the same.
You're owning it.
Yeah, I am owning it. This is my story. Part of coming out of the police, I still do go to see a psychologist, and he sort of led me down this path, or steered me in this direction, when he made the point, how many people within the PSNI have been shot, and not very many, a handful. How many of those people who were shot have then went on to work in the specialist role that you have worked in? I said, well, nobody. He said, well, isn't that a really unique story, and a story worth telling? You know, and that was great. I loved all of my time within the police until probably my ignorance around mental health and PTSD. Once my world came crashing down, I didn't know where to turn.
Yeah.
But now I've come to terms with that. I'm still struggling with PTSD, but it's something I'm going to own. I want to share my story. I want to take those skills I have through 21 years of policing and take them into the outside world.
Well, if you help one person, it's well worth it, isn't
100%,
it? 100%,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, everybody in life that will go through challenges, different types of challenges, but also each challenge is extreme and personal to them. So obviously you've been shot. You know, that's I mean, majority of people, and like 99.999% of people will go through life without being shot, touch wood. But also there's also people out there who've had car accidents with trauma, people out there who've had family tragedy. You know, we all have different, PTSD just comes in all different shapes and sizes and formats and all that. And I suppose whatever's your problem, that's important to you. Whatever is your issue, that's important. It's not like, well, I have a worser issue than you. You know what I mean? Everybody's issue is bad. That suits each other, you know?
Yeah.
Where can people find you? How can they get in touch if they wanted to speak to you, get you to do some speaking, getting you into some corporate companies and all this kind of stuff?
Well, I have, for obvious reasons, have avoided social media for the last.
Why?
20
Because
odd
he's a
years.
peeler, mate.
So I am now on Instagram as Chris.Stothers Permetum. So Permetum is my business name, Permetum Limited. Permetum is Latin for moving forward. And I took that from, I Googled it at the time.
If you did move forward, you might have missed the bullet.
Indeed, yeah, fair point. I came up with that because leaving the police, I thought, what do I want to do here? Well, I want to move forward in life.
Yeah, I know.
I'm absolutely shitting myself. So I Googled moving forward with fear. So Permetum Pergendum is moving forward despite the presence of fear. I've called the business Permetum. And
That's really cool. That's well thought out.
Yeah.
I like that.
So yeah, I'm on Instagram, Chris.Stothers Permetum. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm starting Facebook here as well.
And he's also on local street corners and Newtonards.
Yes. But, yeah, happy.
And he's
happy
also a
to
good golfer, Chris, as well.
I don't know.
We play a bit of golf together. Chris Stothers, thanks for coming into Cork.
No, thank you very
really
much for
interesting
having me.
story. I hope people, we can normalise policing here. Make it real community focused and get people to be like Sean's generation now of ringing the police and slowly killing off the flames of this constant segregation and getting people to work together. I think it's important that police officers do that, to come out and say, hey, we're people too. I'm not on any side. I just want people to have safety, and if things go wrong, and put criminals in. It's not about us v them. It's about just having a civil society.
Yeah, very much so.
That's all it is.
And in defence of the people of Limerick, we have 182 listeners from Limerick.
To the people of Limerick,
They constitute 22% of our monster audience.
This is the official. To the people of Limerick, I apologise. The words just slipped out of my mouth. You're good people, Limerick. You're good people.
Could I just say, Andrew, thanks very much for having me on the show. This is the first time I've spoken, on a public forum,
Hey,
really. Yeah.
Listen, and I'm sure there'll be many more opportunities for you going forward.
Hopefully so.
You own it. You're going to do great things. I think the majority of people, have a bit of cop on.
Yeah.
That they'll realise that actually it's important to hear it, because when you walk down the street and you see a PSNI car, you actually go, oh, they're not against us. They're just trying to make sure that we're all okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's about changing that perception.
Well, I think, I hope that Northern Ireland is in a better place. Sorry, the north of Ireland. I know you're personally.
Hey, you know where I'm from, but the 32.
I think we're in a better place now. I hope we're in a better place now where I can come out and say this was me, and hopefully that's received.
And own it.
Well,
own it.
yeah.
And you don't realise it when you own when you own it. People go, oh right.
Yeah.
They can't go. Hopefully, we never know. We might see in season 3 of Blue Lights.
Yeah, who knows?
You know what I mean? You could be like, there's a shooting scene. Quick, ring Chris. He knows how to deal with that. Chris Stothers, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys. See you all at the pod Sunday. Respect. Up Limerick.